Hey guys, it's Matt. I saw this morning on the Tails Taller YouTube channel. I'm not going to link to it. It was less than a 30-second video, basically just showing what I'm showing you now. And I'll read it, and if you're driving or something, you don't need to see it. But the reason I'm making this video, the first thing I thought was this is absolutely the reason why I believe in the concept of the egregore, or the thought form entity creation, or the thought form demon. Again, if you're not familiar, it's called Egregore. Now, disclaimer, I'm no expert on the concept of egregores. I've never created one. I don't want to create one. I have no interest, as you probably know. And it's not just related to huge entities, huge corporations, or governmental bodies becoming basically alive, basically becoming an entity in and of itself. That's the area of under this egregore umbrella that most interests me. People talk about creating thought form demons on a much smaller scale. Actually, the people will dabble in them. I don't get into any of that. I don't want to get into any of that creepiness, but it does, to me, relate to how a gigantic organization presents itself. Procter and Gamble Corporation, Nike, an entity inside the U.S. government, like the Department for Homeland Security could be its own egregore. The Sacramento government in California, all these massive organizations, and people would say, "Well, what are you saying, Matt? This isn't making any sense." A large corporation, for example, is just people working together. You're not suggesting that the entity itself has basically becomes in a way I don't think anybody truly understands, in a way sentient. In a way, the organization becomes a egregore or a thought form demon, something in and of itself that's almost, I don't know any other word, sentient. Yes, I believe this is the case. I believe people that are familiar with egregores would agree with what I'm saying related to the large corporate entity, the government entity, the administrative agency inside the U.S. government, etc. And it relates to what I'm about to read for you here. I'm going to read this rather quickly. Any portion of this is really not that important. It's just the U.S. government making itself larger, another organization, another administrative entity. Relate that back to the general concepts of a potentially sentient egregore. So this is not that important if you miss anything. So, what a coincidence. Proposed Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health. Recent advances in biomedical and health sciences, from immunotherapy to treat cancer to the highly effective C-19 vaccine, demonstrate the strengths and successes of U.S. biomedical enterprise. Such advances present an opportunity to revolutionize how we prevent, treat, even cure a range of diseases. Blah, 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 blah. To improve the U.S. government's capabilities, here's where it needs to grow. It always needs to grow. This is the point of me making this video. It takes on a life of its own beyond the people working in a compartmentalized fashion inside of its walls. To improve the U.S. government's capabilities to speed research that can improve the health of all Americans, President Biden is proposing the establishment of a new organization. Is anybody surprised? The Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health. The Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health, ARPA-H, included in the President's 2022 budget as a component of the NIH, or National Institutes of Health, requested funding level of $6.5 billion. Blah, blah, blah. Throw up your lunch. This was the image that Tails Taller used, and it's perfect. If you back up far enough, if you're in the middle of working in Sacramento for the California state government, oh, this has to be done, and this paperwork and this TPS report needs to be filed, and it's all very important what you're doing at the micro level. Everybody believes, well, probably not everybody in Sacramento believes their job is important. Probably half the employees are just staring at a clock waiting for 4:59, but you understand what I'm saying. They all probably believe to some degree they have an important role. Even the four people in the Apple TV show Severance that do nothing all day, but literally like move numbers around on the screen of which they don't even know what they're doing, they start to believe over time they're doing something important for the corporation. But that's another video. If you back up far enough and look down from a hot air balloon at the State House building in whatever state, or Sacramento, or Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and you look at this agency inside the U.S. government, or look at the United Nations, and you just keep backing up, keep backing up. It does start to, if you weren't close to it, it does take on all the characteristics of, in and of itself, being alive. I believe this. Many people believe this. It relates to the term egregore. Now, Matt, in what way is it sentient? I don't. The detail. Who knows? Who knows? But what is that case? Somehow was it some way associated with Mitt Romney, the People's United or something, where a court case determined that a corporation is people, or corporation is a person too? Remember that weird case about 10 years ago? That's all, to me, these egregores laying foundations for themselves to evolve as living entities. I believe this. This is, to anybody new to this concept, I don't, it's the craziest thing in the world. The old guard understands what I'm saying. I'm not an expert at it, but people, I've talked to enough people that are really know, what these egregores are. Some people dabble in creating them themselves for certain purposes. I'm not interested in that, but I think they would agree that yes, the corporate entity, or the massive entity, the huge massive bureaucracy inside the EU or whatever it might be, egregores inside egregores, yes, take on like a sentient life form. And if you back up far enough, it takes on all the characteristics of being alive. And the main one I want to focus on here, and pointing out in the article coming in, is it always needs to grow. It can never, ever cut itself back. Back to the original image for a few minutes, where the Biden administration is proposing a multi-billion-dollar budget for the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health. Okay. Now, whenever it's unnatural in that whenever it adds an arm to itself or a tentacle onto itself, it never goes back the other way. And it's been doing this. All corporations do this. They gobble up other corporations. They don't ever get smaller. Governments always increase in size. Agency numbers increase. They never go back the other way. And I know there's a whole litany of excuses at the person-to-person level somebody could come up with. Matt, nobody wants to give up their job. Everybody fights for their own department. And of course, if it grows, everybody can keep their job. And I mean, all those excuses, okay. I mean, they're all valid. But why couldn't you say they're all just people inside the organization that have been inside the organization or the gigantic entity for so long, they're tuned to its frequency? We talk about the download being tuned to the frequency of what the negative part of reality wants. I think you work in Sacramento long enough, you become tuned to its frequency. Maybe you're not thinking on your own in every regard. You're doing what the egregore or the thought form demon, which is the gigantic state government, wants. But I don't expect it to be cut. Matt, you expect state governments to constantly be proposing cutbacks? No, I don't expect it to be 50-50. I just expect it to be a little bit better than 99.8 to 0.02. It never cuts itself back. I'm sure if you go through the catacombs of the Library of Congress, you can find some government agency somewhere, maybe happened to be run by a mayor that was actually a real person that said, we don't need this department. It exists, I'm sure, but it's like 98 to 2, okay, or 99 point something to 0.02. It's like it can't cut itself back. You'll never we don't have to do this over and over. You guys know where I'm coming from. You'll never hear an announcement, ever, from the city of Chicago or the city of Philadelphia saying, we did better than we thought this year. And not only are we going to give some money back, these two agencies, they don't do anything anymore. We don't, yes, I know if you go back to the history books, Matt, the New York City School District was so budget crunched that it had to cut this and that. I know, okay, I know. It's a multi-generational, multi-decade, even multi-century script that's playing out in reality itself. Sometimes it must do things to fit the script. I mean, there's no logical explanation as to what. Well, there is an explanation, but nothing that makes sense in a book. How decrepit New York City was and parts of New York City was in the 70s versus what it has been over the last 20 years. We know where the money came from. It came from a supercomputer. But where do people on the street think it came from? There's no new industries or new manufacturing or anything that really generates economic prosperity in the United States that would completely revolutionize not just New York City, but all the other decrepit cities. It's all part of a long term script. These entities, they become basically thought form demons. They become, in a way, alive. Like I believe, in a way, the internet itself has a sentience. Almost every one of our current problems, where we had problems in the 70s and 80s and 90s, but in terms of the magnification of how bizarre and how screwed up life itself has gotten, where we don't even recognize what's going on outside our window, you can trace it back to the beginning of the internet, and then it compounds exponentially with as the internet grew. There's some sort of sentience there. I don't understand it, okay? But let's just keep it to corporations and large governments basically becoming thought form demons on their own. The endless presentation of the eye. Now, I don't expect every time the United States government adds an agency or another slimy tentacle that the eye is going to be presented every single time. I guess that would give itself away. But is anybody surprised that this, of all the images, this is what, and not just any old eye, an eye related to a merging of technology. That is what's being presented in this image if you can't see it. It's an eye with an overlay like a Google Glass with all sorts of, it's a digital overlay, a merging of the eye with the digital. And of course, people have been yelling at me and rising up that I should have said this earlier, but yeah, it's obvious what's being presented here. And is that giving away ultimately what it wants to when all this research is leading to, a further merger of the quote human body with what hopefully has not already become a biomachine or a biocomputer, but they want to keep pushing it in that direction. That's a whole separate video, but I just at least wanted to comment on the image here, of course. And you can't talk about corporate entities basically becoming sentient and egregores on their own without talking about the movie Branded. It's been a while. I remember liking it. I remember, it's I guess it's somewhat low budget. I remember though just some of the concepts and 4 or 5 scenes really hit me as being really incredibly well done. And I guess if I remember, there would be a corporation, and it's almost like they live, like somebody with the glasses can see the real message. I guess the guy or the star of the movie, if I remember correctly, he can see maybe above the corporation is this giant worm. It's like a giant demon, but it's presented like a cartoon character or almost like a clown or a blow up clown in the Macy's Day Parade. And maybe he can see it, but of course, anybody just walking into the office building can't see it. So there's a huge demon that's associated with each major corporation. And I think I remember he's actually at a meeting, I believe, where the demon's tentacles, like he's meeting with a CEO at a nice walnut or cherrywood table, people on one side of the table from one corporation, people at the other side of the table from the other corporation, but he can actually see the tentacles of the corporate demon plugged into the CEO, where the CEO, when he looks in the mirror or she looks in the mirror, wouldn't see anything, wouldn't even be aware of how that CEO is serving what the egregore wants. I believe this is mostly literal. I really do. Coming into view, that image on the far left, if guys you're driving, it's just thumbnails from Google Images. You're not missing anything. The image in the middle, it says 2020 movie. This movie's not 2020. I don't know what that movie is called, Branded. This movie would have to be 2015 or before, down to 2010. So maybe there's a few movies called Branded, but this one is about the demons that actually are part of the corporate makeup. The kid coming in to the screen on the far left, he's begging. I remember this scene very well. Begging his mom for McDonald's or whatever the fast food. It's supposed to be McDonald's. It's painted that way. Mommy, 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 mommy. He's just begging. He's a little chubby kid begging for it. And again, I forget, but maybe the guy can see the actual brand from across the street has put a tentacle, like as attached. You see the tentacle coming in, like plugged into the back of his neck, like Neo would plug into the Matrix. and the McDonald's is like right across the street, and he's like begging, "Mommy, mommy, 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 mommy." And then finally she's like, "Okay, here's $5. Go over and get your McDonald's." And like I guess the guy can see the tentacles plugged into him. He's that overtaken by the brand or the mystery meat or whatever they put in those Impossible Burger guys. We got to talk about Impossible Burger. There's something really, really creepy and dark associated with what they presented a year ago called the Impossible Burger, and it went away. I had, was it Lee or people that really are sensitive people or can see auras, or it might have been Lee that she had an Impossible Burger and it was almost like, I don't know, like she was poisoned, or it wasn't just because it was like bad or spoiled. It was like the metaphysical effect on her being was so horrible, so dark. I mean, I forget how she described it. Don't ever eat an Impossible Burger. I'm sure some vegetarians took that bait thinking, oh, this isn't meat. No, it's much worse. So the kid runs across and gets his McDonald's, and then as he consumes it, you see like huge bubbles float from the kid. His energy floats up, and the bubbles, there's the gigantic brand demon is above the store or above the corporate office, and the Egregore thought form demon absorbs the bubbles that came from the kid. So the kid fed himself, but then what it ultimately did is the kid fed the corporate brand, the entity, which made it even larger and stronger. And does it happen exactly like this? No, but is something like this going on in real life? Yes. Extraction of energy. Who knows? But yeah, I believe these corporations are basically sentient in a way. Okay, the case was Citizens United. And there always is some sort of mockery or truth. Not always, but there's a lot of times there's a truth or a mockery that comes through the name itself. Citizens United, I guess Supreme Court decision, declared corporations are people in some way. Remember that 10 years ago? And it's called Citizens United. What? I mean, it's the opposite of it's stomping on Citizens United. But they do that with the word game. We should have a whole video on how they play that game. It's not just mockery. There's truth that comes. It's mostly truth drops, roundabout truth drops that most people can never see, except groups of crazies like us. So if you just go to the very basics of it, under what set of circumstances could a group of supposedly real people, was Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Supreme Court at this time and all those wonderful people like that, under what set of circumstances could anybody declare some entity with people working in a gigantic skyscraper with corporate legal documents a person? Think about it. It is like the completion of the Death Star. Someone's like, my God, another Star Wars reference. Well, so what? Yeah, it is like, give me a better one. Okay, you want a better one? It's like when Skynet became a sentient. This was a big moment. Now, the corporate egregore, in some way, in my opinion, had been an egregore or some sort of sentience long before this decision. But this decision, see, oh boy, this decision it was a huge milestone for the soft and gentle corporate egregores, and it got people, it got millions of people. Maybe this gets into the real people as reality generation machines, reality generators and quantum generators for the whole existence. It got millions of real people thinking and believing corporations are people. And even if you were against it, that you still were in your mind saying they just declared corporations to be people. I'm sorry to be having to talk about it now, but did that help Skynet? Did that, all the generator beings saying, well, legally they're a person, did that, what's the Pinocchio reference here? The wood of a corporation became that much closer to real boy, with the People United decision. Maybe it had nothing to do with the court case. It had to do with just planting the image or the thought into the creative generator quantum beings that power this entire reality system, putting that thought, and then like overnight, the corporation jumped in terms of its quest to become Skynet. It turned from a really like a crap Pinocchio with bad whittled features and sharp features and bad nose. It turned like overnight or something. Maybe it became like that little kid that was in The Sixth Sense. I See Dead People. He also played that little AI boy that wasn't real. Maybe it just became that, and it has many more steps to go to where it wants to be. It wants to be Dr. Moriarty on the Enterprise walking out of the holodeck into the real world. It has more steps of where the corporate entities want to go. But this was a gigantic milestone for the soft and gentle corporate entities as they want to become real boy Pinocchios. I had the little image box on my monitor set small. It does say it right there, branded 2012. We're going to look at the same image again. And what's happening to the kid here with the McDonald's across the street putting its tentacles into the back of the kid begging for the mystery meat. Then let's just go back to the 9 noble figures on the Supreme Court. How could anybody that's real ever come to a conclusion that a corporation is a person? No matter what slick arguments presented. I mean, I just, to me, it will go back to the scene in Branded where the guy can see that the brand itself, the thought form Egregore demon, has its tentacles, etherically, cannot be seen by the regular person, inside the CEO. And of course, every one of those 9 justices may believe they're serving whatever. And I'm just saying, even there's cronyism and there's political interests, and they might be all aware of that, but could they be literally plugged in like it is depicted in Branded, where they're going to come to a decision about corporations being people or not, and not even believing they arrived at that decision on their own, but actually serving something etherically that they're not even aware of. I don't want to just say I believe that's possible, guys. I believe that's almost how it works. I mean, with mechanisms and stuff we'll never be able to truly understand. Branded just shows a big slimy tentacle and some ridiculous Macy's Day Parade float that represented the Egregore demon plugged into the back of people and corporate CEOs and the kid. And I don't blame him, Branded. I Branded, if I had to make a movie about it or draw it out, I don't know how I would represent it either. But there's something, I guess the bottom right picture there does show where the brand attaches to the kid as he's picking up the fast food. But there's absolutely something to this. It exists, in my opinion, because the evidence of it is just overwhelming. So back to the original image, the announcement of $6 billion to initially fund the Advanced Research Projects Agency for Health. The news article itself isn't that important. Did anybody listening to the sound of the words that are coming out of my mouth think that the U.S. government wouldn't find a way to grow itself? Did anybody believe that it wouldn't use the current crisis to make its agencies even more bloated and more disgustingly overweight, Jabba the Hutt obnoxious, and more spending and more taxes? Did anybody expect that? I mean, did anybody think something other than that would happen? Of course. It's just doing what we... But the reason why it does what it does, how many times do we ever get to the bottom of that? Other than the same old first or second grade excuses that people want to justify their worth. Anybody in a government agency, Matt, always wants to have more people reporting to him or her so he can look good when he looks in the mirror as he makes love to his wife. And all those first and second grade answers, and it is not good enough. Why the corporate entity has to always grow and feed itself, and are these things actually egregores and alive in some way? And then once we have an understanding of how that might be working, and we'll have many disagreements, what's the only thing that's important is then to say, well, what does that tell you about yourself? If the corporation can be an entity etherically, what do you think you are? It's not the atheist position. If the corporate entity can be this, what do you think you are? Times it by 1 trillion. Again, what does it tell you about yourself? That the corporate entity is actually going to become something superior to you? No, if it presents itself as superior in this reality system, just think that tells you how massive you are. It needs you to live. You don't need it to live unless you're stuck on a Gilligan's Island and all that is available is McDonald's. Would that be? How bad would that be? Ginger, Marianne, and McDonald's every single day. Yeah, the McDonald's would kill you before Ginger and Marianne. As I was making this video, I kept thinking about the Jerry Maguire mission statement, not a memo, a mission statement, where he says less clients, not more clients. Getting back to the reason we began this job in the first place. Personal, my late great mentor, Dickie Fox. This business is about personal relationships. If you don't love everybody, you can't love anybody, or you can't love yourself, or all that stuff. You get less clients, not more. This is like it's a truth drop in some way. I don't think it was intended by the writers to be some metaphysical truth drop, but you know how truth slips out in different forms of media and art. Soon as he said, proposed to that group, less clients, and more personal relationships. And he might even in that memo or mission statement may have even tried to translate that into additional profits. It would have been a slower progress of additional profits, meaning if you have less clients and you're more personally attached to your Rod Tidwells, you may have those clients for forever. After they get out of professional sports, they'll do commercials for 15 years. So you may have the clients longer, you may get more out of them. Ultimately, it might lead to more profitability instead of one sports athlete jumping from agent to agent and agent. But so that doesn't work that way with the corporate egregore that must feed itself, the brand. This is a sports agency, whatever it may be. This brand, EMI or SMI, wherever he worked, was an egregore. It had to grow as quickly as possible, and it'll stomp on anybody's back or anybody's life to get what it needs. And as soon as Jerry Maguire says less clients, not more, then everybody went against him. But maybe they're the Bob Sugars of the world. They have the tentacles, the etheric tentacles of the agency itself, potentially up his what or wherever. So they fired Jerry Maguire. They did it at Cronin's. They did same. It's this it's the serving the entity. All anybody can ever think about when they see Jerry Maguire is just, well, why do people constantly have to have, more and more and more? This might not have been someone might say the quarterly results of a public company. This likely, as a sports agency, wasn't a public company, but it's the entity itself cannot take a chance to grow slowly. It must feed itself, and even this Jerry Maguire scene, I believe, feeds into the concept of corporate egregore.